Good day, everyone. This is Lorena from Solarplaza speaking, and we are about to start today's webinar on hybrid renewables, collaborating towards a greener future. I'd like to welcome everyone dialing in from around the world. I'm guessing most of you are at home, and I hope that you're well during these chaotic times. And well, for us, hybrid renewables has become a very interesting topic that has received a lot of attention as renewable technologies develop and mature. So we thought that it would be a great moment to set up a webinar. We will start off the webinar with a few introduction slides, and after that I will hand over the microphone to our two great speakers, Juanita Ojeda from GE and Vasiliki Klonari from Wind Europe. So let's begin with a bit of an introduction. As I've mentioned, my name is Lorena Nieuwenhoven and I'm a project manager at Solarplaza, and I'll walk you through the details of this webinar. After providing some practical information on the software, I will hand over the floor to Juanita Ojeda, who will be discussing the definition of hybrid renewables, the benefits of these power plants, and give some examples of hybrid renewable power plants. Soon after that, I will give the floor to Vasiliki, who will talk about some of the main challenges of hybrid renewable power plants and give us more of a regulatory perspective on the topic. Of course, we are happy to answer any questions that you have as an audience, so feel free throughout all the presentations to submit your questions through the software. We will go over as many as we can during the Q&A at the end after the two presentations. And after the Q&A, we will round off the webinar for today. And first, shortly about Solarplaza, for those who don't know, we are a company based in the Netherlands, and we are a platform for the solar industry. Our mission is to positively impact the world by accelerating the sustainable energy transition. And we do this by organizing conferences around the globe and connecting our network of over 60,000 PV professionals globally. And again, just some practical notes, any questions that you might have, use the question box. Throughout the presentation, feel free to send them out and we will come to them in the Q&A session at the end. Also, the slides of this presentation are already available in the handout section, so if you would like to have a look at them, you're able to download them in the sidebar as well. And we will be providing the recordings after the webinar is completed, so you can expect to see that in your email. So I will move on to our first speaker, Juanita Ojeda, who has been working at GE for over 6 years. She's currently the hybrids marketing leader at GE Renewable Energy, has some consulting experience and a financial background, and I'm very excited to hear what she has to say about hybrid renewable power plants, and I'm very happy to hand over the floor to her.
Thank you very much, Lorena. So thank you again, Lorena. It is really a pleasure being here today and having the opportunity to discuss the developments we're seeing in the hybrid space. I hope everyone is safe at home and coping through this difficult and unusual times. So I would like to start by defining what we in GE Renewable Energy understand as hybrids, right? And this for us is a combination of multiple generation sources and or storage. So this could be a combination of wind and solar, it could be solar plus storage, or even gas plus storage. This generation sources and or storage would be integrated behind the same point of interconnection and have a common plant level controls platform. And when we talk about storage, this could be in the form of either battery storage or pumped hydro. We play in hybrids as GE Renewable Energy with the objective of supporting our customers in a path to a more affordable, reliable, and dispatchable renewable energy. And the way we do this is by integrating the different technologies and capabilities that we have across the GE Renewable Energy and GE, broadly speaking, portfolio. Let me go to the next page. So the need for hybrid systems really comes from an increasing penetration of renewable technologies. As you can see on the charts on the top left, wind and solar are the cheapest energy sources in around 2/3 of the world today. And this trend will only continue as LCOEs for both wind and solar continue to drop. It is projected that around 70% of all new installs happening from now until 2030 will be renewable. And this poses new challenges as additional variable generation is integrated into the system. And this is what we see driving the need for solutions that can help deliver energy when and where it's needed, and at the same time contribute to the stability of the grid. So as I mentioned before, there are different configuration of hybrid systems, and these can help address different challenges, right? Very much related to the increasing penetration of renewable energy that we saw before. The integration of wind and solar, to start from there, allows a hybrid plant to take advantage of the complementarity of the two resources, right? Usually the wind blows at night and the sun shines during the day, and there's really an opportunity to take advantage of that complementarity, which will result in an improved capacity factor of the plant behind the same point of interconnection when compared to a standalone wind or solar farm. And in addition to this complementarity, there's synergies on CapEx and OpEx that will all result in a combined LCOE that's improved versus that of a wind standalone or solar standalone farm. So combining these two factors really allows for the optimization of transmission infrastructure and land in some cases as well. Now, when we look at adding storage, these can unlock additional use cases or revenue streams, right? By integrating storage, energy can be shifted to avoid curtailment, or it can be solved at times of the day when it is more valuable. The system can additionally provide ancillary services to the grid, such as spinning reserve or frequency regulation. And we usually see a combination or stacking of use cases. So a hybrid plant that might be doing energy shifting as its primary use case might also be providing frequency regulation, for example. And here's where having a control system, a plant level control system, plays a crucial role in operating the plant optimally and really making sure that all these revenues can be maximized. So the dynamics of each market really drive the need for different hybrid configurations, and that's why we're seeing different hybrid approaches around the world. There is a growing trend in solar plus storage in markets that have a high solar penetration, such as Australia and the US, where we've really seen large increases in the deployment of solar plus storage, and also larger projects as well. And this is mostly to do energy shifting and peaking when you have a high solar penetration. We're seeing it in the US in states like California, Arizona, Hawaii, and Florida. And it's true that this is driven by the fact that storage solutions that charge directly from solar generation can take advantage of the investment tax credit or ITC. But the trend is projected to continue even as PTC phases out. And I think a good evidence of that is the fact that if you look at the CAISO interconnection queue, you'll see that around 70% of solar projects are permitting for both solar and storage. So definitely a trend that will continue. India is potentially the market that has evolved the most in terms of hybrid regulation. In 2018, the MNRE issued the National Wind Solar Hybrid Policy, and they did this with the objective of optimally utilizing land and transmission infrastructure and also improving grid stability. So really with the goal of promoting wind solar hybrids and opening the window also for the integration of storage. India has executed 2 dedicated wind plus solar tenders so far. They were both awarded at competitive prices when you compare it versus standalone wind or solar in auctions that happened at around the same time. And there is a 3rd wind plus solar auction coming this year. In addition to this, 2 tenders that were designed to incorporate storage were executed earlier this year to provide peak hour energy and round-the-clock energy. So there's good evidence of, again, wind plus solar auctions, and now we're also seeing the role that storage can play. And I think Vasiliki is going to go a little bit deeper into the Indian case later on in her presentation. A 3rd trend is around captive generation. So large energy consumers that are looking at alternatives to burning liquid fuels for self-consumption, and this is really driven by a need for clean energy, decarbonization, but also looking for more affordable and reliable energy. And in this case, the use of hybrid solutions really matches the need of being able to serve specific load requirements when we're talking about self-consumption. And there's a few examples of this in the mining industry in countries like Australia, where large energy consumers are looking at alternatives, at clean alternatives for self-generation without putting, let's say, their operations at risk, and making sure that their load requirements are fully met. And finally, there's a case of islands or islanded systems where the integration of renewables can have an even further impact on grid stability, and co-located storage is required to provide grid services such as RAM control. And we have seen examples of this in places like Hokkaido in Japan or Baja Sur in Mexico, which is also an islanded system. The existence of different use cases and really the uniqueness of each hybrid project requires a system design process, and this is why in GE we usually engage with our customers at a very early stage, and this is to ensure that the hybrid system is designed in an optimal way in accordance to the problem that the customer is trying to solve, right? And we do this, we can summarize this in 3 phases, where we start by understanding the site conditions and any optimization restrictions. So analyzing the solar and wind resource data, the topography of the site, and any restrictions that might exist in terms of point of interconnection size or available lands, plus analyzing the load profile or the load requirements. Then during the value analysis stage, we really try to better understand the resource correlation and curtailment. And we perform an economic analysis that should incorporate all potential synergies, right? And after this economic analysis and resource analysis, the result is the optimal sizing of the plant, right? So depending on what I want to do, how much solar do I need to add? How much wind do I need to add? What is the optimal size and duration of the battery that I need, depending on the intended use case? And this goes hand in hand with the right operational strategy. Through this approach, we have found that in the case of wind plus solar, for example, in cases where we have good resource complementarity, we can drive, by combining wind and solar, we can drive LCOE improvements of around 10% when compared to standalone wind or standalone solar. And this is really as a result of CapEx synergies, OpEx synergies, and improved AP as well. So if we look at a specific example, we can illustrate this better by using a fictional case study where we have the example of a 38 megawatt wind plus 23 megawatt solar project. And we start seeing benefits. Just click through all of this. We have them on the screen. Such as the combination of wind and solar leading to an increased capacity factor. So more AP, as well as de-risking of the generation profile when combining the two sources. So think about it as having a portfolio of projects, and you're de-risking it by putting them together. Additionally, a reduction in auxiliary load costs, as these can be provided by the alternate generation instead of having to buy that electricity from the grid, and that brings savings. CapEx savings through the optimized size of the substation, eliminating duplication of EBOP losses, land optimization in cases where you can use, let's say, the same existing land to add a second generation source. Synergies in everything related to project management and site mobilization, in addition to any synergies in the development stage versus having two separate projects. And finally, OPEX synergies coming from, let's say, common resources for AC maintenance. So again, synergies and cost of incremental drive lower LCOEs, right? Which is really what's driving the value for wind solar hybrids in this case. So as we saw from looking at the trends in the global markets, hybrids have really become a reality. This is a market that exists today and that will continue to grow. And so I would like to finish by walking through a few examples G has worked on in the last couple of years. The first one is a solar plus storage project in upstate New York in the US, where G provided 2 4-hour storage systems that are DC coupled to a solar farm that provides peak load and frequency regulation in the New York ISO. In this case, specifically, the direct DC coupling enables higher efficiency and also CapEx savings as a common solar and BESS inverter is used. A second is a project where we analyzed together with a customer in India a project to replace a coal plant to reduce carbon emissions while also matching a specific load profile. In this case, the project interconnection limit was 25 megawatts for a 43 megawatt wind plus solar plant that also incorporated storage through the value analysis. The right size and duration of that storage was determined to make sure that the hybrid plant could actually match the required generation profile of the end consumer. And the results in this case were capacity factor improvements, as well as CapEx synergies that came from the sizing of the substation and inverters also, as in this case, the solution was partially DC coupled. And here again, controls play a very important role in really operating the farm in an optimal way to make sure that that specific load profile can be followed and that the plant is dispatchable. And finally, we have the example of a wind plus storage plant, which is now operational in Ireland and is receiving revenues from both energy sales through a PPA and ancillary services by providing mostly fast frequency response to air grid. In this case, the batteries were DC coupled and integrated at the turbine level, and they were sized to provide, let's say, the required ancillary services. The system is also controlled by a common G controls platform, which allows it to really be able to provide the ancillary services to the grid. So with this, I will finalize just by saying that Renewable Energy and hybrids in particular is committed to supporting our customers through the energy transition, and we do this by bringing together the broadest portfolio of renewable energy in the industry and putting together all the capabilities that we have across G businesses. So with this, Lorena, I will pass it over to Vasiliki.
And thank you, Juanita. Thank you for your insightful presentation. A lot about grid stability and some of the examples of what you've been able to work with hybrids. But before we move on to questions, I would like to introduce
on the benefits and opportunities thanks to renewable hybrids. So I would like to continue mainly with the points of interest for the wind sector, and on how, to our opinion, the regulatory framework can evolve to make the deployment of such projects more wide, more easy. So as I said, this topic is very topical for the wind sector. So we have been engaging since Wind Europe has been engaging since some years on this. In 2017, we published a position paper on wind energy and on-site energy storage. So in this case, the analysis was about wind farms and storage, different kinds of storage, not just electrical. Last year in July, we published a position paper on renewable hybrid power plants, but in this time combining two different technologies, so mainly wind and solar, and potentially storage, but this time electrical storage. We also have two interactive maps, so two databases and interactive maps on our website with this kind of projects worldwide. I will talk about this a bit later. Which we try to update on a regular basis. And also we are happy to announce that we are now a strategic partner to a conference organized by Solarplaza next October on renewable hybrids. So first of all, let me give you some examples of the kind of projects we have been looking into. So Juanita already presented some of them, but as she also explained, the setup of such projects is also is always very different depending on the needs and on the business case each time. So here I have copied three projects that are already operating, and this is the kind of information we also provide around on our interactive maps online. So the first one, for example, is the Silent Park in the United Kingdom, which is already operating. This one combines wind and solar, so no storage. Its objectives was to enhance and to flatten the power output. And it was deployed as a strategic project for the developer to build knowledge on this kind of projects. The second one is a Graciosa project in Portugal. So this one combines wind and solar and storage. It's deployed on on this island, and its main objective is to reduce the diesel consumption of diesel generation on the island. And the third one is again an off-grid hybrid project which combines wind and solar and storage. This one is in the mainland in Spain, and again its objective is to minimize diesel consumption in the area. However, overall, why is the sector looking into such projects? As I said, last year we ran this analysis focusing on wind and solar hybrids, and we have identified a number of benefits they can offer to different stakeholders. So Juanita, she explained quite thoroughly the benefits for developers and owners. However, there are benefits also to the society as a whole and to power systems, or to system operators. So one of the first one is maybe that in certain cases, and this is mainly when the resources, wind and solar resources, are complementary, these kind of projects can offer a more cost-effective and optimized use of grid connection. So this is why some system operators are already looking into facilitating the deployment of such projects. They can offer, they are because of their diversity, high diversity factor, they can also be they offer a lot of flexibility and adaptability to different system conditions. They can offer a more efficient land use for different reasons, an optimized use of the land to combine the technologies in terms of developing distances, other permitting requirements. They can accelerate the rural electrification, so they can support security of supply in isolated areas, for example, or on non-interconnected islands. And thanks to all these, directly or indirectly defer investments in grid infrastructure. Of course, some of these benefits are also benefits for system operators, so thanks to the complementarity of resources where this applies, they can mitigate the variability of renewable energy sources. So they offer a possibility for a more easily scheduled power dispatch, less peaks, power and voltage peaks, and mainly when storage is included, they can reduce balancing needs and curtailment compared to plants, pure wind or solar power plants of the same total capacity. So have these considerations been indeed accelerating a market for renewable hybrids? Our answer for the moment is yes. I'm trying to, yeah. So here you can see two snapshots of our interactive maps. The one at the top is the map showing plants combining two technologies, so wind and solar, or wind, solar, and storage. And the one at the bottom is the one showing projects with wind farms and on-site storage. So first of all, these two maps, there are no overlaps between these maps, so they're all different. They have different projects. So when it comes to wind plus storage projects, so the first one I think we have in the database dates from 2011. However, the acceleration of this kind of projects started, I think it's based on the data we have collected in 2015. So we now have around 90 projects in the database. And in what regards wind plus solar and maybe storage projects, the older one in the database is from 2007. However, the number of such projects has been increasing a bit later, so as of 2017. And we have around 80 projects in the database. So I know there are many such projects in the pipeline, so which are going to be operating in 2020, 21, after 23 or 25. So I would also like to take the opportunity with this slide and invite all the participants to send me any projects they know that we could include in the database. An important thing is that the last time we updated both of them was July 2019. Yeah, so at this point, I would like to clarify what exactly we include in our analysis in terms of wind solar hybrid projects. So when we talk about them, we mean projects where in which the technologies, the generation technologies, share the same substation and same grid connection. So not projects that are just the one, not project where the technologies are just installed the one next to the other, so they have to share the same substation and grid connection. And we have identified two configurations. The first one you can see at the left of your screen, so it's just sharing the same substation grid connection. And the second is the one where PV panels are integrated with the turbines. The most popular one, so the most frequent among the projects we have identified, is the one at the left of the screen. Yeah, so as I've said, the various benefits that can be offered by hybrid renewables, they have indeed accelerated their market uptake in the last years. However, in order to fully exploit their potential, we think that the regulatory framework should evolve. So we have tried to identify which are the areas into which policymakers should be looking in order to improve this framework for hybrid renewables. You can see on the screen the areas we have identified. So first of all, the definitions of such plants, then some factors that affect the design of the plant, of course, permitting and development procedures, monitoring requirements, the addition of storage, and in some cases the investment framework. So let's have a closer look to some of them. So in terms of definitions, we think it's very important that renewable hybrids are very clearly defined in national regulations. So this means that the regulation needs to describe which technologies are considered. Are there any ratios of capacities considered? For example, is a power plant with 95% wind generation and 5% solar generation considered under these definitions? What are the potential grid connection configurations? Potential storage operation configurations, or is storage can be storage operated independently from the generation technologies or only as an auxiliary component? Then a very important question concerns different needs, maybe in some cases between new hybrid power plants and existing power plants, renewable power plants under hybridization. So how these two kinds should be defined in the regulation, and in some cases countries should consider whether different framework should be established for hybrid power plants in areas where they are more attractive or they can offer more benefits. For example, islands or other isolated places. In terms of plant design, so as Juanita also described very well previously, the complementarity of wind and solar resources is very important to make such a project viable. Because if complementarity is not there, then maybe a project of the same capacity, but pure wind or solar project could be more interesting for the developer. Of course, it's not as simplified as this, and Juanita explained this very well. There are many studies need to take place for this, curtailment studies, cost-benefit analysis. So, however, when complementarity is there, we think that the developer should be able to install total renewable capacity higher than the contracted one with the grid, as long as the total exported power from the plant does not exceed the contracted one. However, some countries, because they want to take quicker steps for the deployment of hybrids, they even allow exported power from such plants to be significantly higher than the contracted one. Then in terms of storage, we think that there should be no generic capacity restrictions, but the sizing should be optimized to the business case of its project, to local system needs, this mainly to avoid oversizing of storage, for example, when this is going to generate challenges for the local system. However, we think there should be no generic capacity restriction. In terms of permitting and development, as I said, it's very important to have already established and very well defined this project in the regulatory framework, and then to when designing the permitting procedure for such projects to consider, to take into account particularities that may not exist in pure wind or solar generation plants. Grid connection requirements should be very clear, and in case of hybridization, so retrofit, for example, of existing power plants, it needs to be clear when re-permitting is needed, which procedures need to be repeated. Will it depend on the additional capacity that is going to be added? So it's a number of factors that need to be well studied before developing this framework. Finally, monitoring requirements are very important. So based on the analysis that we done last year for our position paper, we've seen that this factor has created many delays in the final development of such projects, because it's not clear in many national frameworks, and it creates a lot of uncertainty for the developer and for the local authorities. Sometimes these requirements are subject to interpretation of local authorities, and we think this should be very well established in the national framework to accelerate the deployment, because it has to do with the traceability and power labeling of renewable energy. So monitoring requirements will clarify any suspicions for providing grey energy to the grid, for example, instead of renewable energy. Some countries go even one step further already in their regulatory framework by trying to look into technical and communication challenges for dispatching and scheduling of hybrid power plants. So are there any countries that are already take quicker steps to facilitate hybrid power plants? For example, Ireland. So the TSOs, EirGrid and Sony in Ireland, they are working with the industry to enable an increase of the capacity factor of given connections through the installation of hybrid units. So they have the framework is already quite friendly, as already installed capacity of such plants can be 20% more than the maximum export capacity. However, the TSOs have run a consultation last year with the industry, and based on the outcomes of this, they are now trying to increase this limit beyond 20%. They are already exploring different challenges, technical and communication, on how to prioritize, to dispatch and schedule hybrid power plants for system services. And they are also looking into allowing multiple separate legal entities to share connection points, because they believe that this one is going to accelerate to favor the deployment of hybrids. In the link at the bottom of my slide, you can have direct access to the consultation and the priorities that are of TSOs concerning this aspect in Ireland. Another example is Portugal. So thanks to a recent policy update, the hybridization of existing wind or solar power plants is encouraged. So the installed capacity can be higher than the contracted one if a different technology is integrated in an existing plant. So this strategy has been mainly made for retrofits of existing sites, for example, to mitigate power output losses due to age. Another example is Greece, where the regular authority for energy has been working on a support framework for the development of renewable hybrids in non-interconnected islands. So first of all, hybrid power plants have been established in the national framework in terms of definition, capacities. The regular authority for energy has proposed a support framework favorable for revenue stabilization of renewable hybrids on non-interconnected islands. And until this framework gets approved, the application process for the development of new projects is already open to developers. And finally, a very good example that Juanita also mentioned is India, where since 2018 there is in place the National Wind Solar Hybrid Policy with the objective to promote large-scale wind solar hybrid projects. In the link at the bottom of my slide, you can access it. It's a quite clear document with definitions, potential configurations, technologies for new and hybridized projects. So in this case, not only the installed power, total renewable generation can be higher than the contracted one, but also the exported power from the plant can be higher, of course, subject to actual transmission capacity, to real-time transmission capacity conditions. In terms of revenues, they deploy a tariff-based transparent bidding process, which I think, so I think in this case, the tariffs are a function of the capacity of the power plants. And also there is a mandate to regulatory authorities in India to formulate standards and regulations for such systems in order to facilitate the development of technologies that will be necessary for a wider deployment of renewable hybrids. So I mentioned these countries because I happen to know a bit more about their framework, but maybe there are many others where the framework is friendly to renewable hybrids. As you will see, I think it's later in the slide. Yeah, no, we also have some poll questions we would like to ask you, and this one is exactly about countries with and their framework for hybrid renewables. Here you can see the links to our position papers that are also published in our website. So I think these slides will be shared with you, so you will be able to access them here. And yeah, I think I cannot go further. Yeah. So thank you very much for joining today. And Lorena, I don't know if we can already make appear the questions on the screen.
Yes, of course. Here's the first question. I'll let you take it ahead.
Yeah, so well, we would be interested to have your feedback on this, on which of these European countries the regulatory framework facilitate the deployment of renewable hybrids. Or I think you can choose more than one. And I would be very interested to know if you. I think there is. I have had my email address in the slides. If I would be very interested to receive more information. If you have this. And then, yeah, the second one. This is the same. Yeah. Okay. So we already
have answers we received.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay.
And as you mentioned, you had a second poll. Here it is.
Okay, and the second one is, so do you think that countries should establish a specific mechanism for revenue stabilization for hybrids, specific auctions for renewable hybrids, or they should have no specific support mechanism, so an equal treatment as other renewable power plants, and or otherwise support mechanism only for specific areas. I don't know if there are already answers to this.
They're probably answering, and here are the answers.
Okay. Very interesting, yeah. So most of the answers are about specific auctions. Okay, thank you very much, and please contact me at this email address in case you would like to also send me projects to include in our database.
All right, thank you, Vasiliki, for your insightful presentation. As I really enjoyed listening from both of you about the possibilities of this grid stabilization through hybrid renewable power plants, but at the same time, taking this cross-industry perspective in the renewable energy sector, because I find it very important for our industry to be constantly innovating, and this seems like a future innovation for all people involved, solar, wind, or storage. But we do have quite a few questions, and I will go through them now, and until our remaining time, I will answer these questions, but feel free to keep sending them in. I will start, and I guess you, Vasiliki, or Juanita can ask who can answer depending on who feels it's better for them. One of the questions we had was, is the 10% decrease in cost synergy worth the extra complications? Oh, sorry, my questions moved. Is the 10% decrease in cost synergy worth the extra complications for the control system and overall plant design? I think this question came during Juanita's presentation, talking about the decrease in cost with hybrid power plants. Juanita, do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure. No, I think I got it, Lorena. Thank you. I think key skills are required in the design of a hybrid plant, and it is definitely worth, let's say, a more interesting business case. So I don't know if I can answer that question without looking at a specific project, understanding what is the value that can be driven. It should be a project by project analysis. But what we've seen is that the sort of synergies that we see in solar plus storage result attractive, right? And really improve the economics of a project, and more importantly, help optimize the use of infrastructure and maximize the use of a given point of interconnection. So again, it has to be taken on a project by project basis, but overall, this is, let's say, a positive outcome of combining wind and solar.
I see. Well, then, thank you for your answer. I'm going to move on to the next question. And the question is shading of wind turbines a problem for solar production? If so, how has this impact managed in existing wind-solar hybrid projects?
So it is something to take into consideration for sure in the design of a hybrid plant, and it's part of what goes into the analysis, right? So you need to look at shadowing and what can be the impact. So definitely one of the criteria to consider when designing a wind and solar hybrid plant.
All right, perfect. Another question I have, this one is in particular to Vasiliki. The question is, India seems to be the world leader in regulation for hybrid power plants. How can we, as an industry, learn from them? Who are the leading players?
First of all, the policy is in India is quite recent. So I think also the number of projects that are operating there are not many at the moment. For the main players, I'm not sure I can mention the names now. I think Juanita G is one of them, right? And you have already presented the one of your projects there. But I think that very soon, as this is one of the priorities of the energy ministry in India, I think that very soon we will have many deployed projects in the country, and the way to learn is to analyze the benefits that have been managed thanks to them.
All right, perfect. Yes, thank you. And I'm not sure if you can name any names as of yet, but then maybe we can move on to our next question. We received actually quite a few questions asking about the role of concentrated solar power, or whether CSP will have a role in the future of renewable energy generation and storage, or even in these hybrid plants. I don't know if either of you could answer this question.
Could you please repeat, because I'm not sure I heard?
It's about the role of concentrated solar power, whether this will also play a role in these hybrid power plants. So taking CSP rather than just solar panels.
Mm-hmm. So what I can say is that from the projects that are already operating, I think there is no project using this technology. So I'm not able to say what will be the role of it in the future.
All right, makes sense. But then perhaps a question for G. I don't know how much in depth you can go into this, Juanita. It's about your project in Ireland, your wind and storage project, and asking if the G hybrid controller is used for providing the ancillary services. And the comment is that this seems a very interesting revenue source for new and existing wind plus battery projects.
Correct. So the wind controller is used to really operate the battery as part of the hybrid system. I would say we're happy to provide more details if the person who is asking this question wants to send me an email, and maybe we can understand better the sort of information that they're looking for.
All right. Thank you. And I guess I can still, there's a lot of questions, so it's hard to read through all of them at once. But there is a particular question if there are any offshore hybrid solar and wind power systems in the world. I don't know if Vasiliki, through your database, if you've seen any of these or heard about the possibility.
As far as I know, there are no offshore hybrid. So combining wind and solar, I think in the design phase there might
when solar and wind interconnect at the substation. I think the example was both on Vasiliki's and Juanita's presentation. What are some of the technical considerations to consider for the proper operation of the hybrid power plant when they share the same substation?
I think, unfortunately, I cannot go into too much of the details. I don't know exactly what sort of technical details we're looking for. I think from a controls perspective is about really understanding when to operate one source versus the other. Right, and at a certain point, you might need to curtail the solar, for example, if for some reason you reach your POI limit. But usually the curtailment analysis shows little overlap between the two sources. But beyond that, I wouldn't be able to provide more details.
Of course. Then maybe I could ask you a broader question that we have here. It's just asking about the most challenging operational aspects of existing wind and solar hybrid power plants and how these are being addressed. So maybe from a more general perspective.
So I would say it's the same thing. So in addition to some of the challenges that Vasiliki already mentioned through her presentation, right, going through the permitting and let's say setting up the wind solar hybrids, it has to do with operating it in the correct way to curtail the solar resource, for example, if you need to at some point. Unfortunately, there's not enough wind solar hybrids out there for us to have full data. Again, this is a question that I think the technical team in GE might be able to answer in more detail if there's any specific requests. Again, Lorena, we can always follow up on some of those topics.
Yes, of course, and also some of those most in-depth questions. Well, then I'll maybe pick two more questions. I think this one is more perhaps towards Vasiliki of her knowledge of the regions for hybrids. The question is, do you think the UK will evolve as a market for hybrids? And there was also a different question of asking about the viability of Europe as a market for hybrids.
So unfortunately for the UK, I don't have information on the framework for hybrids combining two generation technologies. I don't know if there are any developments for this. I think that it's quite the framework is quite friendly to renewables combined with storage. Also very much on the ways they can be used to fulfill their business case or system services. And on the second part of the question, I think that this depends very much. It's probably a more local issue and depends very much on how complementary for example, the wind and solar resources would be. So I don't think there is one answer for the whole continent on this.
Yes, makes sense. Thank you, Vasiliki. And I suppose I had also just a few questions of the integration of these generation technologies with batteries. I have quite a specific question. I don't know if you could answer. The question was, when we talk about integrated storage, what is the dominant type of storage you are seeing it use? Is this Li-ion flow batteries? And whether we're going to see much of an increase in pumped hydro, I assume hydrogen.
So I would say that the technology that we're seeing the most is definitely lithium ion, and the use case that we're seeing the most is solar plus storage, right? So I talked a little bit about it during the presentation. A lot of solar plus storage deployments in the US specifically using lithium ion. I would think that as we think about shifting energy, not just time of the day, but seasonally, and there's opportunity, let's say for longer duration storage, we will start to see more pumped storage plus renewable hybrid projects. So there's not many of those deployed yet, but I think there might be opportunity for some of those. Again, pumped storage requires very specific topographic conditions, and it's not viable everywhere, but definitely a potential use case for hybrids.
All right, thank you, Juanita. I think I'll take that as our last question. I'm going to round up then our presentation here. I would really like to thank both you, Juanita and Vasiliki, for participating in this webinar on this topic that I think a lot of people seem quite interested to learn more. What are the possibilities of connecting, combining, and co-locating two different renewable energy generating technologies, and as to keep the industry innovating. And I personally have learned quite a lot of thought-provoking insights, but I would also like to mention, and if I could pass on to the next slide, that we are indeed hosting a conference about this topic at the end of the year, but right now it's clearly the situation is very chaotic as to traveling and etc. But I do invite you to keep up to date on this website, because we will be posting more content about hybrid renewables. We have some a position paper along the way. So if you would like to keep up to date on the content we're posting, do check it out there. It is also where we will keep updating people on the topic. Other than that, I would like to wish everyone a nice Thursday. Thank again our 2 speakers for the day, and I hope you all have a good end to your week. Thank you so much.